you're probably one of the most diversified investors that I've had the privilege of speaking to. You've got stocks, cryptocurrencies, gold, venture capital from your Shark Tank deals, and of course you've got watches. Let's talk about your personal journey. You've got a wide spectrum of watches in your collection. Since when did you start collecting?
Well, my stepfather worked with the United Nations, and we traveled a lot, and it's headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. And so he was constantly going back there. We have a home in Geneva. He's now, in fact, a Swiss citizen. And in the 70s, mid-70s, he introduced me, took me down the Rue de Lac. We drove right into Geneva, and all the great maisons are right there by the lake in Geneva. That famous water spout. You're going to find Rolex, Patek, AP, all of them. They're all there. You can walk between these massive maisons. And he took me in and started showing me watchmaking as an industry and the output at that time. And I just got hooked. I mean, when I was a teenager, I knew all the different makes, all the brands, all the models, all the movements, all the calibers, all the cases, all the dials. Wow. And yet I couldn't afford anything. Right. Because, it just was out of my reach, and he wasn't going to extend, he taught me to go make it on my own. When I could afford it, I came back with a vengeance, but I already knew pretty well all the details of what was collectible, what wasn't, what makes, what brands, what was hot, all of it. And so I have been insatiable in terms of building my collection. And I enjoy it so much. And the watch community globally is a fascinating group of individuals, kings, monarchs, collectors, physicians. I mean, you name it. It's just the most remarkable. And I know most of the world's largest watch collectors now. That's the bond between us.
Do you remember the first piece you bought?
Yes, I do. Omega Speedmaster Moonwatch.
Wow, that's the classic. Okay.
Mid-70s. Yes. And I've had since then, 2 of my collections have been stolen inside jobs. But that piece I was able to recover. And it's a very valuable piece, both emotionally, but also the movement, the caliber at that time was very important because they built some of the best movements then, because they're, of course, in the NASA program at that time.
Right. Did you buy the Snoopy Moonwatch that came out recently?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. And I'm actually going to be getting that in a few weeks. It's going to be one of my Shark Tank 8s in season 14. It will be a one-of-a-kind with a red band on it. And I think the reason the Snoopy is taken off, for those of you who don't know it, in the back dial, there is Snoopy on a rocket ship going to the moon. And the Bitcoin community has gone berserk over that watch. And so I don't flip my watches, but if I wanted to sell it, I could make a fortune on that piece, but I won't be doing that.
Well, especially since it's got your signature red band on it. I know the story behind that. I'm going to talk to the audience about some of the pieces that you have today to show us. But first, I want to get your thoughts on this story. I was reading an article by the Financial Times that came out about a month or 2 ago. And I'll just read the headline of one of the paragraphs here. It says, Chinese investors pick luxury watches over houses. The wealthy are spending their extra cash on Rolexes as rare downturn grips property sector. And it says here, property has been a one-way bet in most Chinese cities, but the urban housing market was liberalized in the late 90s. Now it says here, most of the wealthy in China, well, not most, but a big percentage of the wealthy in China have traditionally bought houses as a store of value. But now they're shifting their extra cash into Rolexes, Pateks, and other luxury brands. Is this a trend you've been noticing all around the world, or is this exclusive to just China?
No, it's all around the world. It's all through Asia, all through North America, in India, everywhere. There's a huge movement going on in terms of collectors that are considering mechanical watches art, no different than modern art. However, some watches have appreciated even more than art. And as a result, you have to honor the craft, because let's face it, the baseline is none of us needs a mechanical watch. The time on your cell phone is the most accurate time you can get today. And yet we're willing to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for a piece that takes up to 2 years to make, meticulously by an artist that started their career when they were 14 or 15 years old. To become a master watchmaker is a dedication of a lifetime. And that's one of the things I do when I collect watches. I honor the art. And the makers know that I do that and give me access to the pieces. Watch collecting is a very complicated pursuit. It's about relationships and honoring brands and collecting brands and getting to be known within the community as somebody who's in it for the reasons that are long-term in nature.
When you got into the hobby, or the passion, if I may call it that, you didn't think about it as maybe buying your first moon watch as an investment item, did you?
No, I didn't. I just wanted that thing because I was a bit of a science geek, and that what the piece was covered by all the space magazines and the journals of the time. There was no internet then, so you'd be running around trying to find the magazines and get a copy of it, talking about the movement of the astronauts that wore it, how the watch worked. It's a chronograph. I mean, and when I finally got that piece as my first piece, I was literally to the moon.
Figuratively, hopefully one day literally as well. But Kevin, watches have, well, the high-end watches at least have gone up tremendously in value. I was actually at a dealer here in Vancouver. I was looking at some Omegas, just browsing, and they told me just January they raised the price again. I think it's happened 2 or 3 times in the last year. Every quarter or something, they raise the price by a little bit. It's more than beat inflation. It's just outpaced everything else by a lot. Why the price inflation in Rolexes and Pateks and all the high-end watches that are hard to find? What happened in the last 2 years, Kevin?
Well, in the last 2 years, let's say on Omega as a brand, Omega was acquired by the Swatch Group. And generally, when a giant behemoth luxury brand takes over a watch brand, that sometimes is not a good outcome for that brand. But in the case of Omega, it worked out because, as you know, they affiliated themselves with the James Bond brand, and they brought out James Bond pieces that were very, very popular. The quality of the calibers, the movements remained high, which is very important to collectors. And then you had this phenomenon of great dial design in the last 2 years. Omega's watchmakers and artistry has really, really been cutting edge in terms of bringing forward the sports watch and even the dress watch. Are not as much as in favor for any brand. Sports watches right now in the steel format is smoking hot. And Omega hit it in stride. And then along comes the Snoopy, which just went viral. And so when a brand gets a hit like that, it just pulls up the entire brand. And today, collectors covet Omegas, particularly vintage Omegas. And also the Snoopy is a must-have in every collector's, portfolio.
It's hard to find, Kevin.
They're very, very hard to find. And I'm a very, very lucky guy because I'm well known as a collector. Yeah. And I love to tell the stories of my watches. They know I don't resell them. So I'm able to call up the maisons and make my case. And I never ask for a watch for free. I want to honor the artist. I'll buy it, and I never resell it.
Well, speaking of buying something, it's difficult to buy a Rolex these days. You can't. Very few authorized dealers will let you walk in unless you're Kevin O'Leary, I suppose. You have to have a waiting list, 2 to 3 years. What's going on with the supply there, Kevin?
So Rolex is one of the largest watchmakers in unit supply. However, most collectors must have every Rolex, the Batman, the Panda, and it goes on and on and on. And knowing we were going to be talking today, I went to the vault today and pulled some examples. Now,
appreciate it.
When you're a collector, the baseline is to own every Rolex. And I have that disease too. And so when Rolex brings out movements, there are some extremely coveted Rolexes. And right now, the hottest Rolex, first let's start with the classic. Yeah. This is actually the previous white-faced steel Daytona. It has the steel bezel, not the ceramic black. This is an extremely coveted watch. And it's no longer available, so you'd have to buy it vintage if you could get it. The appreciation of this watch is insane. However, this is baseline. You want one of these, and I'm very fortunate to have one. However, if you want to take it to the moon, so to speak, and you want the most coveted Rolex in the world today, it's this.
Wow, what is that?
The Rainbow. Now, the Rainbow, it's unknown how many they make. It's unknown how you get one. Everything's unknown about this, other than most people have never held or touched one. It takes a long time to make because it's got diamonds. It's encrusted in diamonds that actually have the colors of the rainbow on it. So can you imagine how long it takes the jeweler to make this? And so it's got pave diamonds on it as well. as you see here. It's beautiful rose gold. The reason this went crazy as a watch is the NBA players all want one. Now, I've been offered, maybe this watch at retail is about $117,000. Today it trades at $550,000.
Wow.
So that gives you an idea of the appreciation. Would I sell this? Never. Even rarer than this would be what's called the Eye of the Tiger.
That one I know, yes.
Yeah, the Eye of the Tiger, people should realize Rolex not only makes incredible watches and calibers, they have state-of-the-art jewelers. So when these are factory, now a lot of people buy Rolexes and then take them out of factory and jam diamonds all over them. That destroys the value, kills the soul of the watch, makes it worthless to a collector like me. You want factory. Now these are blinged out watches. They're perfect for me in Miami, where I want to be flashy and trashy. And wherever I go, people go out of their minds when they see these watches.
No.
But that gives you an idea of the appreciation you can get. And of course, they're part of my vast portfolio of Rolex vintage and current watches. And that's the baseline. Most people start with Rolex, but there's so many other ways to go and so many other brands you have to explore.
Just the Eye of the Tiger, for example, the one you just shown, how many of those are there in the world?
It's unknown. It's unknown. In order to be offered one, you need a relationship with a Rolex dealer. Rolex have to know who you are. You have to be known as a collector. You can go into the secondary market, but if you want to buy at retail, you have to be committed to the brand. And that's what really matters.
Let me ask you this, Kevin. I mean, there are companies, obviously Rolex is one of the most knocked off brands in the world. Suppose I made a company, I'm not saying I would, but suppose I had a company that replicates Rolexes to almost perfection. If I could hypothetically replicate something that you've just shown, down to the nut and bolt, down to the movement, to the accuracy, would I be able to sell it for as much if the watch buyer knows that it's a replica?
So it's been attempted many, many times. And where you see the error in the fault in the watch, let's go back to the most ripped off watch or knocked off watch there is. It's the Eye of the Tiger and certainly the steel white-faced Daytona. These are two that are knocked off like crazy. And I won't even mention what country they're done in. They're never able to match the artistry of what the jeweler does on the dial. I can take a lube and tell you right away that it's a fake. Now, before you make a purchase like this anyways, you're going to get it authenticated. And even if you're doing it in the secondary market, the Tourneaus of the world, they provide authentication services because if I was going to buy this in the secondary market, I would want the original box, I'd want the paper, I'd want the provenance of the watch, and I want it authenticated for insurance purposes. So, knocked off Rolexes are just that. They're knocked off Rolexes. I think what's far more interesting is what's being contemplated by the watch industry now is the NFT. Because you can take a scan of the dial of a watch down at the micron level. It's essentially its fingerprint, attach it to an NFT and authenticate the watch in perpetuity with your cell phone by simply rephotographing it, matching it to the original scan, and you'll know it's the watch that was actually issued and manufactured. And I'm very much involved in that process. I funded a white paper on this we're working on right now to try and standardize the protocol of that NFT. I'm hoping to be, by July, have that thing worked out and be issuing NFTs and minting NFTs in the secondary market.
Some watch NFTs I've read have been selling for higher prices than the actual watches themselves. So if you're doing this, Kevin, what's your target audience? Who do you think would go in and buy a watch NFT?
So I'm a big believer that, let me tell you a problem that I have and most watch collectors have and many people that have watches have. Let's say you're a collector and you have many watches.
Yeah.
Your insurance bill is very, very high because you're basically insuring watches that are in a vault under a street in some city somewhere, even though you may only keep 10 or 20 with you at any one time. I went to the vault today and pulled out a bunch of pieces so we could talk about it. When we're finished, I'll go back to the vault and put them back in. I only keep with me about 11 to 12 pieces a day. And so I wear 3 different watches a day, one for the morning, one for lunch, one for the evening. They all have red bands on them for television reasons. We can talk about that later. But the point is that I don't need to insure the rest of the collection. So if I had an NFT, I could simply open that up, send it to the insurance companies online and say, for the next 10 days, I have 11 watches out. bid me insurance on these. Here's the city I'm in. Here's where I'm going. So that solves a big economic problem. Number two, authenticity. If the NFT can authorize the watch and stay with it in perpetuity, that's absolutely fantastic. Number three, inventory control. Because I have watches in multiple cities, the NFTs could actually be where I move them from one vault to another, and they would always know with a single glance where the piece is when it was last used. So the digitization of watches is definitely coming. In addition, the watchmaker, particularly watchmakers that make watches for less than $1,000, where they make millions of watches, know nothing about their user base. They don't get any registration cards. With the NFT, in order to authenticate and get the insurance, you would have to download their app, give them the information, and all of a sudden they know everything about their customer base, and they can make you offers based on the dial you bought, based on the style you bought, based on the price point you like. So there's a huge economic incentive for the industry to get behind this, and I'm very proud to be part of the team that's pushing this agenda forward.
Let's talk about those red bands. I know you have a signature red band on your watches that you wear for Shark Tank exclusively. Do you buy them from, let's say, a third-party vendor, or do you go to the factory themselves and say, I would like a particular watch with a red rubber band on it? Because sometimes these watches, they have bracelets built into the case, so it's probably even difficult to take off the original bracelet, is it not? How does that process work?
So the majority of the watches that I buy today are one of a kind, made for me. So the Maison makes the red band. I'm extremely fortunate, but I feel I've earned it over the 30, 40 years I've been collecting watches. They know who I am. They know what I do. They know why I need a red band. So that Snoopy, for example, that will be a factory red band with the actual Omega clasp on it. Maybe it's the only one in the world. I don't know, but it's going to look terrific on season 14 Shark Tank. But on top of that, there are many makers that don't have red bands. So I work exclusively, and I have no economic interest in this company, and I don't own any shares, but I've done so much research, because when you put a band, a third-party band on a watch, the integration with the case, and I'll give you an example. Let me find one here. Let me give you an example. This is a jumbo Audemars Piguet, an AP. This is one of the most the blue face, one of the most coveted APs ever made. The classic. Now, AP does not make a red band for this.
No.
So this band is from a company called Rubber Bee, but AP knows that I wear red bands, so they gave me an integration kit. And Rubber Bee makes such a perfect integration that there's no space between the rubber band and the actual case. And so I have these steel lugs that makes that possible. This piece with a red band and a blue face looks absolutely spectacular. I've worn it on Shark Tank many times, but the point is Rubber Bee is a Swiss company. They're headquartered here in Miami. They make the best integrations ever for Rolexes, for all kinds of watches, AP, Patek, you name it. And so they actually have a very, very fine molding system that gives you this incredible integration that you're seeing here. And so I work exclusively with them. But every piece I have has a red band. And so even a Patek Philippe, this is a world timer. This is a very, very special piece. An anniversary piece, the 175th anniversary of Patek Philippe, renowned for the black dial on it, which is just incredible. And now it has a red band, again, a masterful make by Rubber Bee that allows me to wear this on Shark Tank. And I'll say this, if a maker does not like me having a red band, I will say to them, look, I'll only wear it on Shark Tank because I have to have continuity, and I will take it off after that. Vacheron, this is an incredible piece. This, you can see, is a factory red band because it's got the Vacheron clasp on it. This brand is really moving up the feeding chain in collectability right now.
Right.
They're one of the ones that was being held back the last 2 years, and now they've exploded to the upside.
Well, I want to spend a few minutes talking about brands now, Kevin. You brought up some of the ones that I wanted to talk about. Vacheron, AP, Pateks. Why are these three called the Holy Trinity? Why are they so revered?
Desirability, history, the fact that they've been watchmaking in some cases for over 150 years. The unique designs of them are important. It is very rare for a watch company during the lifetime of the founder to reach a coveted status of collectability. And yet there has been a brand in the last 22 years that's achieved the same status as a Patek, an AP, a Rolex, even though the company only makes 12,000 watches and since the beginning of time, 900 a year. And there's never been a story like it. It's F.P. Journe, a French national who moved to Geneva, who makes watches that are so coveted that 87% of the new pieces are owned by the collector base. They are rabid to get those watches. And the appreciation on these pieces in the last 3 years has exploded. I'll show you one that used to be the entry level, Le Bleu, it's called, this incredible blue dial, this unique blue dial. 60% of these dials, when they're manufactured, are rejected by F.P. Journe's quality control. So it's very expensive to make. The dial can be black, it can be blue. The metal is tantalum, which is a beautiful gray. Again, it has the red band factory for me. But what happened to this watch a few years ago, entry price was $28,000. The rumor has it, and I love the rumor mill around watches, Putin was seen wearing this on his wrist. The value of this watch exploded. Now it's $128,000, but you can't get one.
Right.
And Teddy Baldassar did a great video. I encourage everybody to go see it. He talked about the heritage of this piece. When I wear this piece, I get stopped in the street. This dial is all about creating conversations. It's so unique. And yet it was an entry-level Journe. It was one of his most inexpensive pieces. But the brand has exploded. That's what's happened. If you like that video, wait till you see my next one. Don't forget to click right over here and subscribe.